Rhythm games, a genre of video game that generally involves making inputs in time with the beats of a song. The goal is to primarily survive the songs in the game without reaching zero health due to missing too many notes, and secondarily is to try and improve on yourself and your previous scores by hitting the notes more accurately each time you play the song. Although most rhythm games such as Friday Night Funkin' or Beat Saber come with a plethora of songs to play in the base game, they will eventually lose their charm due to repetition for score improvement. That's where the community comes in. Most rhythm games will provide the tools necessary for making custom songs that can be submitted to the game. This can lead to the creation of potentially endless catalogues of community-made levels. Speaking of community, today I'm going to talk about how the community of Beat Saber makes the game stand out from other similar rhythm games due to their community creations. To start with, let's talk about Beat Saber's debut album, OST1. Shown in the background now is the first song in the entire game, named $100 Bills. The footage you're seeing in the background is on Expert Plus difficulty, so keep that in mind whilst I'm talking about this. To begin with, notice how the scroll speed of the song is rather slow, which is not ideal because it gives the player a false impression of how fast the song will be in terms of notes per second, which is also known as NPS. Also, a slower scroll speed makes the song feel slower and less interesting, which can lead to disinterest in the song, as a result making it harder for the player to stay focused on hitting the notes. This can sometimes be so bad in the early songs of Beat Saber that you may feel like you're playing the song in slow motion, despite playing the song in full speed. Something to point out is that most of the notes are placed in the 4 cardinal directions, which makes the chart feel rigid and simple. This could be improved by adding notes that have to be hit diagonally, like later on in the build-up of the song. Speaking of the build-up, the usage of diagonals is an improvement on the previous parts of the song. However, the rapid saber crossing makes the usage of this feel unnatural. It doesn't really flow well into the next pattern, which isn't helped by the fact that you have to cross the sabers whilst also aiming up higher than usual. Even when you finally manage to get this part correct, it feels incredibly clumsy when you do, because it doesn't flow well at all into the next part, which has you going up and down again with your sabers, which feels like a jarring transition from what you were previously doing in the song. It's almost like when you fall asleep in maths class. Before you fell asleep, they were doing 1 plus 1, which was so boring that you fell asleep. But when you wake up, they're doing the quadratic equation and solving algebraic equations using it. Like, dude, what happened there? How did you manage to go from 1 plus 1 to the quadratic equation in the matter of about 30 minutes? Going back to that pattern at the build-up of the song, I think it could be better if those diagonal notes were at the eye level of the player instead of being above them, because that would make the saber crossing pattern feel less of a stretch across your entire body and more of a quick swerving motion, which would feel a lot better to play than whatever we've got now. Finally, I want you to pay attention to the lights in the background. Specifically, I want you to count how many different colours the lights can change to be. I'll wait. Still waiting. Okay, that's enough time. Spoiler alert, the answer is 2. Bonus points if you notice that the 2 colours used are the same as the colours of the notes. This generally makes the environment feel a little bland, since everything is either blue or purple in this example. And no, black doesn't count, that's just what you called the lights being turned off altogether. Keep these criticisms in your head for later, they will be important. Alright, now I'll be switching over to the song Censored by the artist T. Pazoline. Some things to bear in mind here before I begin analysing this one. Firstly, this song is a custom chart. Don't go looking for it in the OST5 or something because you won't find it. Secondly, the background footage for this song is in Expert, not Expert Plus. I'm not that good at the game. Unlike most people that play the game, I'm indeed a human too. Crazy, right? Thirdly, I know this sounds really stupid, but please try and ignore the Mag 9 earthquake going on in the background footage in this part. I had to turn off smooth camera so that I could actually play the song decently well. Trust me, I did try and use the smooth camera for this song, but it was just far too laggy for me to even play the first 5 seconds of the song. Usually I wouldn't mind this, but preferably I'd like to be able to have footage where I'm actually doing the motion that I'm talking about in my script. Don't worry though, this shaky footage won't last for the rest of the video. There are some clips of certain songs that won't be like this. Anyways, with all of these disclaimers out of the way, let's begin. Okay, starting off with the scroll speed, notice how it's much higher than it was in the song $100 Bills. This is done to prevent unnecessary sensory overload due to there being too many blocks on the screen. Trust me, that's really important on a song that can get as fast as 7 to 8 notes per second at its peak. Another thing that I want to point out here is the usage of straight lines going in one direction, which you can see here, for example. Look how they are positioned here on the stronger beats, which in this case are the ones where you swing downwards. This forces you to follow through with your swings, making the beats have more emphasis than usual. These are dubbed as sliders, as it's what you do to hit them. Yeah, I know it's not a perfect name, but do you really want them to be called swipers? That just doesn't sound right to me. Anyways, back to talking about the song. Just after the peak in difficulty, we can see this pattern where you have to twist your hands around each other, which is difficult to get used to. However, it feels much more natural than the Saber crossing pattern from $100 bills. It's mainly because you don't have to cross over your entire body several times in the span of a few seconds. Instead, this pattern makes it a gradual process which eases into the movement, making it feel less sudden and awkward. Finally, there are generally lots more notes in the song overall than in $100 bills, which makes the looping pattern of the drops feel like they are less drastic and more gradual, like the previous pattern I mentioned. Now that we have an example of a good map, let's go into the future and see what Beat Saber songs in the 5th OST are like. Speaking of the 5th OST, let's start off with the song I Wanna Be a Machine by The Living Tombstone. Straight away, the player is hit with two things. First of all, there are now far more colours in the environment backgrounds. As well as this, the backgrounds are now generally more detailed. Secondly, the first note has a cool line coming out of it leading into the next plot. These are dubbed by the developers as arcs, which is accurate to what they make you do with your hand. Crazy way of naming things, right? These arc notes allow for sustained notes to be more engaging to hear, as beforehand you'd either have to use noodle extensions to make a really big curve out of lots and lots of notes, which would mess up the average MPS on the song menu. Alternatively, you could just map the swing where it starts and the swing where it ends, hoping that the player would just imagine the curve. However, this can sometimes leave massive blank sections in songs, which can sometimes make people think that the song is unfinished. Either way, it's good that they have the new arc notes so that you don't have to use either of the previously described methods, because neither of them really are good. They just disrupt the flow of the song, in my opinion. I will admit, though, that sometimes the arcs can produce really weird angles that you've got to move your arms in. But I mean, I'll take this any day over the old arcs. I mean, just look at it. Do I even need to say what's wrong with this? Moving on. Remember those sliders I mentioned earlier? Yeah, the Beat Saber developers made their own version of those. Later on in the song, we see these funny onion ring looking things. These are known as chain notes. Said chain notes are the Beat Saber developers' take on the sliders I previously mentioned. Personally, I do prefer the precursor to these because they're generally more sight-readable. However, this does prove my point that Beat Saber is indeed listening to their community. To address the diagonal notes I was going on about before, you can see in the background footage here of the song Firestarter how they are using significantly more diagonal notes, which makes the charting feel less rigid and more free-flowing, especially when you combine it with the arcs and chains from earlier. Okay, that's everything I have to say about this topic, so on to the conclusion. In conclusion, the community of Beat Saber makes it stand out from other rhythm games of the same caliber and popularity of itself due to the creativity and interesting charts for pre-existing songs the community have created. There's a lot more I want to talk about, however I don't have the time or sanity to talk about it here, since I've already spent 2 hours recording what I've already got here. Well, I hope you enjoyed this short video essay and goodbye for now. Oh, and if you're interested, the rest of the script I plan to read out is on the website. Okay, goodbye.